The suitcase sat open on the bed like a wound. Priscilla's hands trembled as she folded the last silk scarf. Each piece of fabric, a memory she was ready to abandon. Outside, the wrought-iron gates of Graceland stood sentinel, but inside, the king of rock and roll's empire was crumbling. The woman who had stood by Elvis Presley through fame's meteoric rise and its devastating consequences had reached her breaking point. In 30 minutes, she would walk out of Graceland forever, unless the conversation that was about to unfold could save the most legendary romance in music history. This is the untold story of love, betrayal, and redemption behind the mansion's closed doors. The crystal chandelier in the Graceland bedroom cast fractured rainbows across the walls as Priscilla Presley carefully placed her jewelry in the velvet-lined case. Each diamond, each pearl represented a chapter of her life with Elvis the shy, 14-year-old girl in Germany who had fallen for a soldier, the young bride who had walked down the aisle to marry America's heartthrob, the mother who had watched her husband transform from lover to legend stranger. "You're really doing this," she whispered to herself, her reflection staring back from the ornate mirror that had witnessed countless intimate moments. The woman looking back bore little resemblance to the innocent teenager who had first stepped foot in this mansion. Lines of worry etched her forehead, and her eyes held a weariness that no amount of makeup could conceal. The sound of Elvis's voice echoed from downstairs. That familiar laugh that had once made her heart race now only served to remind her of how distant they had become. He was entertaining again, surrounded by the Memphis mafia, his loyal entourage, who enabled his every whim while she sat alone in their bedroom, planning her escape. The catalyst had been the previous evening's incident. She had found him in his study at 3 a.m, pills scattered across his desk like confetti. His speech slurred as he tried to explain his latest creative vision. When she had attempted to flush the medications down the toilet, he had erupted in a rage that shook the very foundations of the mansion. The man she had married was disappearing before her eyes, replaced by someone she no longer recognized, their daughter Lisa. Marie's innocent question that morning had been the final straw. "Mommy, why does Daddy sleep in his music room instead of with us?" How could she explain to a 5-year-old that fame had built walls between them that love seemed powerless to tear down? As Priscilla closed the suitcase with a definitive click, she made a silent promise to herself and to their daughter. She would not watch the man she loved destroy himself any longer. Sometimes leaving was the only way to save someone, even if it meant breaking your own heart in the process. That the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 8 o'clock. In 1 hour, her sister would arrive to drive her to the airport. In 1 hour, she would walk away from Graceland and never look back. Elvis Aaron Presley stood at the bottom of the curved staircase, his hand gripping the banister as the reality of what was happening upstairs crashed over him like a Memphis thunderstorm. Red West, his closest friend and bodyguard, had just delivered the news that would shake him to his core. "Boss, she's packing. Priscilla's really leaving." The words hit harder than any critic's review, any manager's betrayal, any fan's rejection ever could. In that moment, the king of rock and roll felt more vulnerable than the poor boy from Tupelo who had once stood outside Sun Records, clutching $3 and dreams of making his mama proud. "She can't leave," he whispered, but even as the words left his lips, he knew how hollow they sounded. How many nights had he chosen the stage over their dinner table? How many promises had he broken in pursuit of that next hit, that next movie deal, that next pill to keep him going? The Memphis Mafia exchanged uncomfortable glances as their larger-than-life leader appeared to shrink before their eyes. Elvis dismissed them with a wave of his jeweled hand, his mind racing through memories like a film reel played in reverse. He saw Priscilla at 17, nervously adjusting her dress as she met his friends for the first time. He remembered their wedding day, how radiant she had looked in white, How he had whispered promises of forever that now seemed as fragile. As spun sugar, the irony wasn't lost on him. The man who could command the attention of thousands with a single hip swivel had somehow lost the ability to communicate with the one person who mattered most. Fame had been both his greatest blessing and his most devastating curse. It had given him everything he thought he wanted, while slowly eroding everything he actually needed. He thought about Lisa Marie, their precious daughter, who had inherited his dark hair and Priscilla's grace. What kind of father was he becoming? What kind of husband had he already become? The answers cut through his ego like broken glass, leaving him raw and exposed in the opulent foyer of his own home dot as he climbed the stairs toward their bedroom. Each step felt heavier than the last. He could hear drawers opening and closing, the soft rustle of fabric being folded. These were the sounds of his world ending, and for the first time in years, Elvis Presley was truly afraid. Not of performing, not of failing, not of losing his crown as the king of rock and roll, but of losing the woman who had seen him as simply Elvis. The man behind the legend, dot at the top of the stairs. He paused, gathering courage he hadn't needed since his first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. Elvis stood in the doorway, watching his wife fold their life together into neat, organized piles. The sight of her wedding ring sitting on the nightstand beside a half-empty bottle of perfume, the same scent she had worn on their first date nearly, brought him to his knees. "Scylla," he said softly, using the pet name that had been his alone since she was barely more than a child. She didn't turn around, but her hand stilled on the silk blouse she had been folding. "Please, just ... please, look at me." When she finally turned, the tears streaming down her face reflected years of accumulated pain, disappointment, and love that refused to die despite everything. "I can't do this anymore, Elvis. I can't watch you disappear a little more each day and pretend it doesn't destroy me." He stepped into the room, and for the first time in months, she didn't move away. "I know I've been a fool, baby. I know I've hurt you in ways I never meant to. But don't leave. Not like this. Not when we haven't even tried to fight for what we have." "Fight for what?" Priscilla's voice cracked. "You're never here, even when you're standing right beside me. The pills, the late nights, the other women, do you think I don't know? Do you think Lisa Marie doesn't see how hollow this has all become?" The mention of their daughter hit him like a physical blow. Elvis sat heavily on the bed, his head in his hands. "She's the reason I do it all, Scylla. Everything I do is for her, for you, for our future." "No," Priscilla said firmly, sitting beside him but maintaining distance. "You do it for them, the fans, the industry, everyone except us. When was the last time you tucked Lisa Marie into bed? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my fears, my day?" The questions hung in the air like accusations, and Elvis couldn't answer because he couldn't remember. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped seeing his family as people and started seeing them as extensions of his image. The beautiful wife, the perfect daughter, the ideal life that magazines could photograph and fans could envy. "I'm scared, Priscilla," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared that without all this, the performing, the chaos, the constant motion, I'll just be that poor kid from Tupelo again. And what if that's not enough? What if I'm not enough?" For the first time in months, Priscilla saw the man she had fallen in love with, vulnerable, honest, and desperately in need of the one thing his fame couldn't buy: genuine connection. The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Elvis reached for Priscilla's hand, and for a moment she let him take it. Her wedding ring caught the lamplight, and he remembered sliding it onto her finger 6 years ago, promising to love and cherish her above all else. "Tell me what you need," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Tell me how to fix this, and I'll do it. I'll do anything." Priscilla studied his face, searching for signs of the manipulative. charm that had become his default mode with everyone around him. But what she saw instead was raw desperation, the fear of a man watching his world crumble, not because of bad reviews or declining sales, but because he had forgotten how to be human. "I need you to get help," she said finally. "Real help. Not just promises or good intentions, but actual treatment for the pills, for the lifestyle that's killing you slowly. I need you to choose us, really choose us over everything else." "The tour," he began, but she cut him off. "We'll survive without you for a few months. Your fans will wait. The industry will wait. But Lisa Marie won't stop growing, and I won't. Stop dying inside, and eventually there won't be anything left to save." Elvis looked around their bedroom, at the gold records on the walls, the photographs from movie sets, the symbols of a success that suddenly felt hollow. Then he looked at his wife, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. He saw the woman who had given up her teenage years to love him, who had endured the fishbowl existence of being married to Elvis Presley, who had raised their daughter while he chased dreams that never seemed to satisfy. "What if I can't do it?" he asked. "What if I'm too far gone?" "Then I'll know I tried everything," she whispered. "And I'll leave knowing I gave us every possible chance." The weight of the choice settled on his shoulders. He could feel the pull of his old life, the easy escape of pills, the adoration of crowds, the familiar chaos that had become his norm. But he could also feel something he had forgotten existed. Hope for a different kind of life, one where love mattered more than applause. "Okay," he said, his voice stronger now. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll get clean, I'll get help, I'll be the husband and father you both deserve. But I need you to stay. I need you to help me remember who I was before all this." Priscilla closed her suitcase and set it on the floor. It wasn't a guarantee. They both knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with setbacks and struggles. But for the first time in years, she saw a glimmer of the young soldier who had promised to love her forever. "I'll stay," she said. "But Elvis, this is our last chance. If you break this promise, I won't be strong enough to give you another." The conversation that night in March 1973 didn't save Elvis and Priscilla's marriage. They would eventually divorce in 1973. But it did save something more important: their ability to love and respect each other, to co-parent Lisa Marie with dignity, and to preserve the beautiful parts of their legendary romance while acknowledging its limitations. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on. It's learning when to let go with grace. Ready to discover more untold stories of love, fame, and the human heart behind the headlines? Subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive access to the intimate moments that shaped music history's greatest legends. Because every icon was first a person, and every legend began with love.